It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. My lucky day. Don't need a pot of gold.
Good morning, everybody. Today's August 27th, and I want to welcome you to episode 29 of Coffee and Cloud Native. Wow. My name is Adrian Goins. Every night, I and my army of bots scour the internet for news and content related to Kubernetes and Cloud Native, and every day you'll find me here to share the bits that I find interesting. This is a curated list of content. I go through around 200 submissions every night, and I only select a handful for the next day's show. Last night, I was particularly excited because I was able to get through them all and still get to bed on time, which doesn't usually happen. So these are the tools and the products and the things that I myself would use, but I can't use all of them, so I'm excited to share them with you, and yeah. So I guess that's what I do, right? I share them with you. I was trying to figure out where to go with that. I'm excited to share them with you because I can't use them all, or because they're cool, or because I want you to use them, and I want you to tell me that they're cool, or tell me that they're not cool. God forbid. And you save me a bunch of trouble. Who do we have in the chat? Good morning, Peter, Devin, Espen from Norway. Welcome to the show. Ariel, hey Ariel, nice to see you. Justin, Wojtek, cześć. Sasha, oh, everybody's saying good morning, good morning, good morning. Marcel, Chris, Sajad, hey, nice Sajad. I haven't seen you in a few days, have I? I don't think I have. Been off on holiday? Today we're going to start with a trip down memory lane. Who remembers Varnish? Raise your hand. Varnish is... Oh, my teleprompter just scrolled to the totally wrong place. Okay. So Varnish is an HTTP caching engine that back in the day was like the thing to run. You stick this in front of all of your web servers and it did caching. And they had their whole configuration language, and it was pretty complicated. It was pretty cool. And I've never seen or heard hide nor hair of this thing since we all moved over to Kubernetes. And by we all, I mean like, the four of us. Because do you also discover that like we seem to live in a world where everything is Kubernetes, but it's kind of like we're all at a exclusive resort in the Maldives or something like that, and if you step like outside of the resort, like nobody knows what Kubernetes is. There's a whole world of people that haven't yet figured out what we know. So either we're in a cult and they're laughing at us, or we know what's up. We need to get them in here. Either way, we need to get them in here because the beach is really nice, isn't it? So Varnish still has a place in the world. HTTP caching still has a place in the world. And I discovered this a couple of nights ago, which will run Varnish in front of all your stuff. So it's more than just running Varnish, because like anybody can just spin a Varnish and drop it in place. It's actually a controller that watches the endpoint of it watches the endpoint. And on startup or change, it deploys a VCL file from a template, and then it does all of the swapping in of the corresponding data and whatnot to stick a potentially HA Varnish layer in front of whatever your application is. It also includes a signaling endpoint. I don't know why that... There are some words that are just really hard to say in the morning. I was going to say a signaling backend, but that's totally not right. It includes a signaling front end endpoint port, so that you can actually do all of your Varnish communication with it, which... In his example, he's like, you could put an ingress in front of this. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just hit it with port forward or something. He's like, put an ingress in front of it and then secure it. You don't need to actually be nailing your... let me change that. You don't need to... You don't need to actually be talking to the Varnish signaling port all that often. So just port forward when you need to actually do it. Anyway, this is super comprehensive, and do I overuse the word super? I feel like I might. What word should I use instead? I'm going to keep saying super. Okay. Oh, I guess, right, so Java's on vacation. Yeah, so Varnish, if you have a need for HTTP acceleration of an application, there you go. Next up, part 2 of Craig Morton's deep dive into Chaos Mesh. Well, deep dive into Chaos Engineering, part 2 Chaos Mesh. It's actually part 3 of the whole series, part 2 of Chaos Mesh. And, oh, glorious, hyper, totally. People are suggesting words I can use instead of super. Majestic. I thought this was, because I don't just use super in the context of like a standalone adjective. I use it as an adverb to modify something else. So it's like super cool, super neat. I can't really say majestic cool. I can say hyper cool. It's glorious. It is gloriously cool. Okay. We had the part 1 of this on the show a couple of days ago, and he's out with part 2 now, and it's everything that we can expect it to be. He goes further into the stress chaos experiment set. I don't really know. Sometimes I just don't know how to describe these things. Chaos Mesh has multiple different groups of experiments that you can run, and this one is about stress, which has 2 things. One is CPU burn, and the other is memory burn. He says memory bun. It's a typo. I was thinking Princess Leia. Memory buns. There you go. You'll never forget Chaos Mesh now. So he goes through stress chaos, and then just like the other article, he goes deep into describing what it is, how it works, how to set it up, demonstrations of it. You can just follow along with this, once again, using a mini kube cluster, or if you want to actually go and deploy this out in a real cluster, knock yourself out, and get it up and running. But I actually like that he shows you the setup in a safe environment, because it's important that you understand how these tools work before you go and kill real things. So he just has you spin up a mini kube cluster and then spin up 10 Nginx systems. And then also, how do you know that it's working? So he goes on after setting up the actual experiment. We'll talk about the dashboard in a second. After setting up the actual experiment, how you can monitor these. If you have metric server, you can just run kubectl top, and then you can actually see when it starts to freak out and do whatever the stress testing is for the actual chaos engineering. Hang on a second, my notes just like scrolled off the screen again. I hope that he continues with this series. This is, what was the other thing yesterday? Hands down the best, hands down the super, hands down the awesome. This is just a really great series on understanding chaos engineering and picking the right tool that works for you, or just picking all of them and then just using the one that you like the best, that has the coolest name, that makes you feel the warmest and the fuzziest inside. Whatever your criteria are. Craig Morton. But I said that we would talk about the dashboard. It appears that he is actually using, or was using, the upcoming 0.9.0 release, which dropped 2 days ago. This includes the Chaos dashboard for creating and managing all of the experiments. It also includes some other stuff like protected namespaces, because you probably don't want to go doing chaos engineering on kube system. Maybe you do. Pod injection for stress chaos, sidecar injection template for IO chaos, and a fix to a bug that was actually preventing the burn memory stress experiment from doing anything. How many people do you suppose ran that experiment and they were like, oh wow, my application's really resilient. It just works fine. Yeah, so apparently burn memory was a no-op. Oops. I think we have another oops coming up in the show later on. Not an oops from me, but another oops from a tool. Glorious. I'm going to say glorious. Tubular. Michael, you just dated. You just identified how old we are. We've got Bill and Ted's excellent whatever sequel coming out where like Bill and Ted are old and pretending like they're teenagers. It looks so terrible. But anybody who saw the original Bill and Ted's, particularly if you were in high school at the time, we're going to have to go see it. So yeah, totally Tubular, dude. All right, Stalker! That's my wife in the chat from over there. She likes Tubular. Yeah, man. All right, so this is going to be Bill and Ted's Cloud Native show. No more of that. Next. Yesterday I said that I had a thing that I needed y'all. Yesterday I said that I had a application, a thing that I was going to demonstrate that I needed your help with. And this is it. This is Brigade. Brigade is a tool for... I'm not really sure. They say that they're a tool for event-driven scripting for Kubernetes, because like we can read, right? It's a tool for running scriptable automated tasks in the cloud as part of your Kubernetes cluster. First off, that's kind of what Kubernetes does. So let's dig into it a little bit further. First of all, if any of you are in the chat and you use this, like I'm gonna keep checking the chat over here once I figure out where my mouse cursor went, and let me know if you use this. Nuno says after Brigade go to draft. Okay, maybe. So you can build stuff in JavaScript. You build workflows in Kubernetes. You use JavaScript. And this is one of those things where it's like, okay, they've got a really cool website. They're a CNCF sandbox application. Clearly, there are people who work on this. It does a bunch of stuff. So if I don't understand it, it's probably not because it's not useful. It's probably because I just don't have the context for it. The examples that they give are you could hook this into a CD system and you could have it do things in response to, like they use an example for what, GitHub Actions or something. Oh, that's a dashboard. That's nice. So it shows GitHub events triggering jobs to like build a system, which is what a CI/CD system does. So once again, I'm back to why. Like, why do I need this? Help me out. It looks really neat. It also, and that's where I struggle. It looks like a tool that looks really cool. It looks like if I just knew what to do with it, I would really enjoy using it. I had a client back with my MSP that I suggested some tool probably like this to, and he described it as a solution in search of a problem. And I got super offended. I got totally offended. Totally, man. I got totally offended because I was like, no, it's great. But looking back on it now in retrospect, I probably just really wanted to use the shiny tool. And I think this might be one of those, but I'm hoping that somebody can prove me wrong. So if you use this, if you can tell me what it's all about, then I'll put it back on the show and I'll talk about how amazing it is once I know why it's the best solution for whatever it is that it's trying to do. All right, Nuno, I see you're posting some stuff in the chat that you're not using it. You can contact the main contributor. He has some videos on it. And Mose shows up and says, sorry for being late. Mose, that's okay. It's not school. It's cool. You can show up whenever you want. Okay, so apparently there's a video out there, according to Nuno, that says that Ralph Squillis explains the linking between Helm, Brigade, and Draft. All right, so help me out. Let's try and get this back on the show, and I just help me understand. I don't understand. This one. This came to me from Manuel in response to talking about ChartCenter yesterday, and it is a searchable repo of different types of artifacts. Let me blow this up a little bit. There you go. It's a searchable repo of different types of artifacts. So it doesn't just collect Helm charts, but it also collects OPA policies, Falco rules, and OLM operators. The strongest part of what it offers from the time that I spent looking at it last night are the Falco rules. And basically, you can search for anything in here. So their example is you can search for like Kafka operator. And it gives you a lot of information. But what I was struggling with is the information that it gives is potentially quite old. This was updated 10 months ago. It also refers you out to things out on the internet, which I don't think that that's a fair comparison to what ChartCenter is doing. ChartCenter actually brings things in, makes them immutable, and you pull them directly from ChartCenter in addition to all the other value that ChartCenter adds on top of it. But ChartCenter only works for Helm charts. ChartCenter, Helm charts. Whereas this will give you other things. So we could select OLM operators, and you see that now you've got, okay, so you've got operators for doing stuff with Kafka. And most of these are pointing back out to the community. You'll get a lot more information out of it, but be careful with the information that it's sending you to, because you still don't know who they are, what they're doing, and it may just increase your workload as you go out and have to pull those things down and look at them yourself and make sure that it's not, yes, install Kafka and a crypto mining utility because that helps Kafka work better, right? Everybody knows that. The more Monero, the more whatever. Now, to be totally fair, this is alpha. They say that it's alpha. I don't know how this is connected to CNCF. I don't know if it's a CNCF project or if it's hosted by CNCF or if it's just refers to stuff with CNCF, but it's actually, oh, it's a Cloud Native Computing Foundation sandbox project. Well, there you go. Answered my own question just by scrolling to the bottom of the page. I think if they can focus on making it more safe and secure, then it will become a strong competitor to what ChartCenter is doing. Otherwise, for Falco rules, it was pretty cool. The other thing that I was struggling with was trying to find things that I could show for Falco. So I typed etcd, and it's like, okay, well, there's a Falco rule for securing etcd. So you dig in, it tells you, it basically looks like it pulls the README from whatever, but you can get the rules for it, so you can actually see what it's going to do before it goes and does stuff. I think that's valuable because we don't all need to write our own security rules. Same thing with OPA policies. It has those as well, although I couldn't find any of them because I didn't know what to search for. So you get OPA itself. Okay, so there. The only OPA policy that I could find in looking last night was this deprecation. Honestly, that just looks like leet haxer, and I'm a little concerned about running stuff. What it says it does is that it'll monitor your cluster for Kubernetes API deprecations. Okay, sounds useful. A little too leet for me. But this was the only OPA policy that I could find. I'm sure that there are others. That's also a struggle for me. If I don't know what to search for to find things, then it's just, anyway. Keep an eye on it. Maybe it'll go somewhere. Next up, we have AWS terse news. Something happened. The end. Version 1.1.1 of the AWS App Mesh controller for Kubernetes is now available and does stuff. There's not really a lot here. Support for Envoy sidecar image, version 1.15, great. A bunch of other stuff you can configure, great. If you're using this, you're probably excited to hear that there's an update. If you're not, we'll move on. And we will move on to kubefire. Let me check the chat again really quick. No updates on the chat. Back to the show. Moving on to kubefire. Kubefire was updated to 0.2.0 with enhancements for K3s, for Skuba, and updates containerd to 1.4. It's a relatively small update, except for some cool stuff. For example, after you restart a node, the Kubernetes cluster running on it will also restart. That sounds neat. And then they did a breaking change where you used to be able to get the config for the cluster with kubefire cluster download, and now it's kubefire kubeconfig get, or something like that. Kubeconfig get or kubeconfig download, whichever. It's the breaking change that that led me to call it out. So it changes some prerequisites because of the containerd update to 1.4. So if you're going to update to this, be sure to run kubefire install so that all of the prerequisites get updated. Next, control page down. I thought this was interesting. This is cloud native, sort of. This. Do you know about these guys? Polyverse. They have a product called Polymorphing. This is really cool. So first of all, the news is actually that they partnered with Suse to support Suse Linux Enterprise Server for their polymorphing application. Suse is deployed in lots of places, and being able to get a supported version of polymorphing on it increases the value of all of the places that it's deployed. But what is polymorphing? Polymorphing does binary obfuscation to stop zero-day attacks. What they do is so smart and probably not simple, but back back in the day. I remember reading a story about when the guy who created Hotmail had the idea to create Hotmail, where he was like, oh, he had like a total freak out. He called a friend of his and he's like, I gotta explain this to you right now, and we have to like do whatever we can to secure this because it was like web-based email? No! And we all know what happened with that. I imagine that the discovery or the realization of this was similar. You basically have a build farm that sits somewhere, and that part is actually open source, and it sits as middleware in front of all of your Linux systems. Any application or package or anything at all that you want to deploy gets pulled down and recompiled, or they pull the binary down and they change register locations and all of the stuff that would allow buffer overflows or anything related to a compromise of an application. They move all of that stuff around, and they do it with PHP scripts, they do it with binaries, so that every single binary running on every single system is cryptographically different. I mean, cryptographically is the wrong term. They're different. So an exploit that expects a register location to be in a particular place for a buffer overflow or whatever just doesn't work. And that's how they stop 0 days. This is deployed in defense and military and people who care. This would have stopped Equifax. This would have stopped pretty much every data breach that was the result of not a configuration error, but an actual application weakness, application vulnerability. Neat product, and now supported on Suse. Mose says, I was thinking about vulnerability and malicious scanning tool for Helm and Kubernetes operators. Is there a solution like this in the market nowadays? Okay, that would be ChartCenter. As far as vulnerability scanning, because, I mean, Helm charts, they're just charts. They just install things. So the vulnerability scanning actually has to happen on whatever is being installed. So that's a container image. That's what ChartCenter does. ChartCenter, they were on the show yesterday. They were on the show previously as well. ChartCenter scans and shows you all of the dependencies. All right, fine. Look at this. We're just going to bring this up. Look what you've done, Mose. ChartCenter.io. Let's pick something. MariahDB. Let's go to the Bitnami MariahDB chart. So here you have a very small screen with very small type. Here you have the chart, and you can see information about every single version of the chart that's existed. So when a new version comes out, they bring it in and they scan it. So chart info shows you where it came from, who maintains it. It is not directly used by anything else. It has one dependency, which is on the MariahDB container image, which has a high vulnerability in some of its layers. And if you look at the security tab, you'll see that it tells you about medium and low. They don't actually show you high severity vulnerabilities. They only show those to the maintainer of the chart, so that the maintainer has the opportunity to fix them and update the chart before everybody comes along and owns everything that used it to deploy, that deployed applications with it. This is the best place that you're going to find for getting information about Helm charts before you go and deploy them. Otherwise, beyond this, you see that this is actually powered by JFrog X-Ray. There are image scanning utilities for container registries. So you could use X-Ray, which is from JFrog. You could use the one that comes from Sonatype that goes into Nexus. I don't remember what it's called. You could use Claire, which is open source, and just run it in your own registry. Harbor is a registry that includes Claire, so you could just run that as well. So there are solutions, but all of those are going to scan container images. So they would scan things as they're coming through. Actually, Harbor doesn't work as a pull-through cache, and that's kind of my complaint about it. Nexus, I know, does. I don't know about Artifactory. So if you were going to use Harbor or Claire in your own, you'd have to pull an image down and then push it in and then let it get scanned, and that's just too much work. I'm not going to do that. This is where I go. Justin says, recompile all the things. Man, dude, security. Okay, Espen says Aqua. The things that I talk about on the show have an open source or a free tier, or there's something that I can talk about intelligently. I know of Aqua. I've never actually used Aqua. I've also never used Twistlock, so I can't talk about them. But certainly if you want to tell me in the chat, Espen, what Aqua can do for vulnerability scanning, I will be happy to just repeat that. Like reading a teleprompter. What was Will Ferrell in something? The weather guy? Anyway, whatever. Forget it. There's an update to the vSphere cloud provider. Hooray! This is also a minor update, except for it fixes this, which is kind of important. This was the other oops. So yes, oops, we accidentally would delete your node from the cluster. There was a race condition where if the VM tools request was taking too long to come back because vCenter was just busy, it would detect that as a failure and it would delete the node from the cluster. So they fixed it. If you're using this, you should update. Okay, we are at the top of the hour. Anchorman, yes, Michael, thank you very much, Anchorman. Those of you who've gone through the Rancher Academy, so if you've seen Anchorman, you know that like he'll read anything that is on the teleprompter. So William and I were we were on our last day of filming, and I changed the script to just put something at the end of his block of text, hoping that he would just say it. So he was reading, and he gets to that part and he pauses for a second and he just says, "Stay classy, San Diego," which is not what I wrote. So if you go through the academy, you make it all the way through, just know that there was something else written there. And in the outtake, it's actually really funny because I just die laughing. Okay. Let's jump now to the tool of the day. Tool of the day is kubelogin. My notes here say kubelogin hooks your kubectl up with an OIDC backend. Because apparently today is the day of innuendo. So yeah, kubelogin. KubeAPI server supports OIDC backends for authentication. This is a plugin that works with kubectl to connect with that. It's the glue. Now there are a bunch of steps to make this actually work, but once it's set up and configured with the provider role and all the other bits, you can run any kubectl command and you'll be redirected to a browser pop-up to authenticate, after which the magic happens and subsequent commands use the OIDC token. There are instructions here for setting this up with Google, Keycloak, GitHub, Okta, and then they have a section for, it's not here, it's somewhere else. They have a section for how to test this. Might even be at the bottom. Nope. Whatever. Somewhere else in here they have a section for how to test this with other providers because it might just work there. And if you find a provider that's not listed here where it does work, please update the docs and submit a PR so that other people can benefit from that. Verification, bind a cluster role, set up the API server, set up kubeconfig, verify cluster access, and here he's got a little Giphy that shows shows it actually working, and then shows the entire communication chain for how this works. This is pretty neat. You can install it with Homebrew, Crew, or you can just install the release directly, and you can get some delicious OIDC authentication up for your Kubernetes. Yeah, there, acceptance test. So you can verify it works with your provider using an acceptance test. Now, if you are running Rancher, this should work with K3S if you add the corresponding, basically in his docs, he shows the additional, at the bare minimum, you need OIDC issuer URL and OIDC client ID, but then there are other OpenID Connect stuff, the tokens or flags that you can add. So if you're using K3S, you will get this from the KubeAPI server arg. You can just pass a quoted string of arguments to pass to KubeAPI server. And if you're doing this with RKE, inside of the RKE config.yaml, there's also a section where you can pass flags directly to kube API server. Now, I didn't test it with RKE or K3s, but they're just Kubernetes. So as long as you pass the flags, that should work just fine. Moses, Twistlock is commercial. Well, Aqua's commercial too. I mean, Aqua has open source things, but the actual Aqua is commercial. Which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I was talking with one of the Aqua people the other day, and I told him that I've never used Aqua because it's commercial, because I can't, like, because I'm just me. But Aqua does have a relationship with Rancher. They've gone on the Lighthouse tour with us. They have a fantastic product. It's not, I can't put my hands on it, so I can't talk about it on the show. I like to talk about things I can put my hands on. There's some more innuendo for you. All right, we got to get out of here. Clearly, I'm out of control. Hey, Tim. Welcome to the end of the show. Woo! All right, so that's all I've got for today. All of the links and the timestamps will be up in the video description about a half an hour after the show ends. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll get a notification when that happens. If you have something you would like for me to consider for the show, hit me up on Twitter and let me know, or just hit me up in any of the ways that my contact details are in the video description. Of course, if I mentioned a tool that you use, please tell me in the comments. I love hearing about people's experience with these things, and I will be here every weekday as long as there's something to talk about, and there's pretty much always something to talk about. So everybody, thank you for joining me. Have a great day. Keep learning. I will see you in the next show. Bye.